Welcome to Nice and Blunt. I'm Adam Riancho, and these are my wide receiver rankings for Week 13. I'm doing things a little differently this week because of the holiday, and I'm kind of expediting my rankings. I might stick with this. I kind of like the quicker process, in all honesty, but I will be finalizing these rankings with some of those like divisional stats I like to bring up later in the week. These are slightly preliminary, but I did do a decent amount of research involved. I will show you the matchup stats first, then break down all of the individual players. But for the most part, the tiers I think are the most accurate depiction of how I view these players this week. I don't think the tiers will change very much. Maybe some slight changes within the tiers, but overall, not too many players will jump above the lines of demarcation between the tiers. So let's get going. We're going to start with the matchup stats. Here on the screen, I have all of the wide receiver matchups laid out on this chart. I think the top ones that are most relevant are giving you a minimum of 30 plus points. And here are the positive matchups this week. The Eagles with A.J. Brown and Devontae Smith get the Ravens, the best matchup this season. But last week they did shut down the Chargers. It helped that Quentin Johnston dropped some passes. So I still think they're a good matchup. They have been playing a little bit better, though, since trading for Tre'Davious White from the Rams. In Atlanta, that's the second best matchup. They get the Chargers this week. So Ladd McConkey and Quentin Johnston also get an upgrade. I don't know if you trust QJ, though. I would only start McConkey in this offense. The Texans are a very good matchup as well, and they get the Jags. So Brian Thomas and Gabe Davis get a slight upgrade as well. The Rams get the Saints this week, so upgrade MVS and Cedric Wilson. The next best matchup would be the Vikings against receivers. They get Arizona, so Marvin Harrison and Michael Wilson would get an upgrade as well. The Chiefs have actually been pretty susceptible to yards to receivers this season. So the Raiders with Jakobi Meyers and DJ Turner, Trey Tucker actually might be interesting. I think Brock Bowers and Jakobi, though, are the main benefactors in that situation. I don't know how much I trust Aiden O'Connell, though. That is a bit tricky. But the Chargers have also been a bit bad in the secondary as of late. Drake London and Darnell Mooney also get an upgrade as well. But next best matchup would be the New England Patriots, where Michael Pittman and Alec Pierce probably get an upgrade. Josh Downs dealing with a shoulder injury. He's week to week, and he may not play. But Cleveland is a good matchup as well. Cortland Sutton and Devon Villay get that one, so an upgrade for them. And then the last one I want to mention that is positive would be the Saints. Puka Nacua and Cooper Kupp should dominate this week, unless Demarcus Robinson vultures their touchdowns. But in terms of downgrades, let's talk bad matchups here. The bad ones would be the Packers. They've been really good against receivers lately, but Jair Alexander did exit last week with an injury, so maybe it's not that bad against Tyreek Hill and Jalen Waddle, but perhaps the snow is a factor. I did see the weather report today. Maybe Tua plays like shit in the snow. I kind of want to change my pick now that I know it could be snowing on Thanksgiving evening. So that might be rough. I do worry about Tyreek Hill and Jalen Waddle, but the Eagles have elite corners at the moment. They're really shutting down players, and they are the second worst matchup. They get the Ravens, so Zay Flowers and Rashad Bateman not as safe this week. Another team that gets a downgrade would be the Tampa Bay Bucks, who face off against Carolina. They rank third worst. So Mike Evans and the backup receivers might get a downgrade themselves. The next worst spot would be Arizona, whose defense has been stepping up. Justin Jefferson and Jordan Addison, a slight downgrade for them. Next, it's Pittsburgh, who's a downgrade. So Jamar Chase and T. Higgins draw a difficult matchup. Next, it would be Washington, where Calvin Ridley, Nick Westbrook-Ikhine get a downgrade as well. And then the last two matchups that are worth mentioning but not as difficult would be the Titans, where Terry McLaurin and Noah Brown get a downgrade, and then lastly the Giants, who could limit CeeDee Lamb and Jalen Tolbert just a little bit. Everything else I think is league average. This last data point here at roughly 25 points per game would be league average. So everything below that is a downgrade. Everything above that is positive. And let's get into my rankings. The top tier, I have the elite difference makers, the players who, if you have, you always start no matter what. I think they're pretty much matchup proof, and even if it's a slight downgrade, you're going to take your chances no matter what. Their odds at a touchdown are super high, and they usually go over 100 yards kind of easily. So Jamar Chase, I'm definitely ranking at number one. He's been elite this season. Justin Jefferson, I think, is due for a blow-up game. I think he does bounce back against the Arizona Cardinals. I'm not actually worried about the Cardinals matchup. A.J. Brown also should be dominant, especially if Devontae Smith is out again with a hamstring injury. And Puka Nacua, his volume will be fantastic. He's the alpha in that offense. St. Brown, slightly down week last week. He did not score a touchdown for the first time in like 9 weeks, and that probably turns around on Thanksgiving against the Bears. So I would definitely start him. He's technically questionable, but it's only because he was limited in practice. They're going to play him on Thursday. I wouldn't worry about St. Brown. But at 6, I think the last player in this elite tier would be Nico Collins, who is very explosive, super dominant. It's impossible to stop him. The Jags definitely will not be able to do that. So I would start those 6 absolutely, definitely, no matter what. They're in my lineup this week. The next tier is a slightly different story. I definitely trust the floor with all these players, but perhaps circumstances don't have them in that truly elite top 6. But CeeDee Lamb caught 10 catches last week. No touchdown, but still Cooper Rush keeps him viable. It feels like half the volume is going to continue to go to CeeDee Lamb every week in the passing game. But Terry is a monster. He's a beast this season, definitely starting him. The Titans secondary is so injured, it's completely depleted in terms of depth. But Drake London has been fantastic. So with Darnell Mooney a little bit banged up before the bye, he's a great start. The Chargers won't be able to stop him. I think Kirk Cousins plays great this week. T. Higgins has been phenomenal whenever healthy, so he's a must start. Mike Evans, a slight downgrade against the Panthers, but still a player you're starting. He didn't score a touchdown last week, but they didn't need him in the passing game at all. So should bounce back. I'm not worried about Mike Evans at all. Cooper Kupp against the Saints, also a must start. These 2 veterans are always in your lineup. And then Garrett Wilson, I think, has really earned your trust this season. Definitely a great player, and you can't ever bench him. At 13, I got Garrett Wilson. But 14, I think JSN has really been established as the number 1 receiver in Seattle lately, so definitely going to start him top 15. Zay Flowers draws a very difficult matchup against the Eagles, but he's been so good this season. I think this game could turn into a shootout still, so I would be starting Zay Flowers. And then Courtland Sutton has been extremely reliable in the Denver offense. Bo Nix is really targeting him a lot. Now the touchdowns are hitting, and Sutton has gone over like 10 plus points at a minimum for like 6 weeks now. Sutton is money in the bank. Very reliable. Elite floor play. I think Sutton is a lock top 20 play every week now. George Pickens, also a very safe play at number 17. I think he represents the last player in this tier, players that you are starting no matter what, but maybe not elite enough to be ranked top 5. Next up, I would give you the low-end wide receiver 2s. Like, these are still very reliable players. I'd rather be starting any of these guys in the flex than like running backs outside the top 27. So all the tiebreakers go to this tier, and at 18, I have Malik Nabers, who made a lot of noise last week. Why he didn't get targeted in the first half, they really changed that after halftime. I expect it to repeat. There's also a chance that Drew Lock is the quarterback. That'd be a big upgrade over Tommy DeVito. So they're tanking, but I do see some garbage time. On Thanksgiving, I do think Nabers puts up a good fight. He's their best player. I would still start him. I think the volume will come back at a high level. And if Drew Lock is the quarterback, we could see some high touchdown upside as well. Calvin Ridley has played very well lately, so I would be starting him. Will Levis is starting to look legit, at least deserving of more time in that offense. I think we might get Will Levis starting for Tennessee again next season. If you asked me in like week 3 this year, I would have told you for sure Will Levis would get benched and probably replaced in the draft. Now, I'm not quite so sure, and Ridley is his top target. I would be starting Ridley every week at this point. Number 20, I got Marvin Harrison, who's, has so much upside, really talented. Against the Vikings, they're really going to need him, and it is a good matchup on paper. I would start Marv pretty much for sure this week. Brian Thomas, I also think, has comparable upside, but we don't know for sure if Mac Jones will return. Last week, before the bye, though, Mac Jones got him involved at a high rate. He had 80-plus yards, even with Mac Jones. So if Lawrence comes back, then those downfield targets come back, and off the bye, I think the rookie will be very much involved in this offense. It is a very good matchup for Brian Thomas, so I kind of feel a little too low on him, but given the quarterback is up in the air at the moment, I'm not ready to endorse him. If you told me Lawrence would start, though, I'd probably rank him around George Pickens. I think I'd put him above Malik Nabers at 18. Then I have Darnell Mooney, who is technically questionable with, I believe he has a hamstring injury, but that was before the bye week. It was not considered serious, and I do think he plays. And I think Kirk Cousins plays very well. The Chargers secondary, not that difficult lately. I think Mooney has earned your trust, definitely a very high-end flex play this season. And so is Lad McConkey, a good matchup for him. I would trust him, high floor. The only receiver, at least wide receiver, other than Will Dissly, I guess, that Justin Herbert does trust. Jamison Williams, I think, has too much upside to bench, so at number 24, I would start him. Definitely trust him if Dave Montgomery doesn't play. But DJ Moore, I think, well, it's interesting. The targets have gone more in favor of Keenan Allen and Rome Odunze the last couple weeks. DJ Moore is still really reliable, catching almost everything thrown his way. So I would be starting him. I think he does have kind of the safest floor. I feel like Keenan and Rome could kind of flip-flop any given week. So I'd still be starting DJ Moore at number 25 as my favorite Bears receiver. But then I have DK Metcalf, who's in the same vein, still high upside for him, but at the Jets, maybe not the best matchup. And JSN does look a little safer at this point, but still really talented. I do think Metcalf is a decent option this week. At 27, a very reliable floor play is Khalil Shakir, who's always in like my top 30. I never rank him like top 20, but he's almost always at 27. Like he's almost so guaranteed for like 9 points. It is kind of funny, but definitely trusting him this week as he returns to the field off the bye. I do trust him on Sunday night. He should play well. Michael Pittman, I think, will be the top target for Richardson again because Josh Downs probably out with a shoulder injury. He is week to week. I don't think Downs will play. So Pittman is the safe, reliable check down guy. I think Richardson will get the ball to him quite a bit against the Patriots. Then I think we hit a teardrop where now I think we're really talking about flex plays, and I don't think they're as safe anymore. I thought the floor was pretty reliable for like over 10, 11 points, roughly double digits for everyone up until Pittman. I trusted the floor. Now I'm hoping for the touchdown. It's still a viable bet to make. I think there is a lot of upside. With no teams on bye this week, you have a lot of depth at receiver. So I do think they're worth a start. I think pretty much at flex, I'd rather be going in this tier unless you have like a top 25 running back. So pretty interesting, but DeAndre Hopkins still a pretty good bet in the Chiefs offense to score a touchdown. I like his floor a bit safer than Xavier Worthy, but yeah, if Worthy does get involved, if Noah Gray continues to score touchdowns like crazy, then Hopkins maybe not the best option, but I do still trust him quite a bit. Jerry Jeudy gets a revenge game at Denver, and he has played really well for Jameis as of late, but against Patrick Surtain, not the best matchup in general. So he's played well. I'm interested. Maybe he really steps up in the revenge spot, but maybe Sean Payton makes him look like just a guy. So pretty tricky here, but the volume has been there for Jeudy. He's looked really good the last 2 weeks. And with Cedric Tillman dealing with a concussion, I do trust the high volume to persist. So I still think Judy's top 30, but I would be worried about it. I get it if you think I'm too high and just want to bench Jeudy against Surtain. That's not the worst bet to make. Jakobi Meyers played really well against Denver last week, though, so that's kind of why I don't fully downgrade Jeudy. And Meyers could do it again against the Chiefs, but the Chiefs sometimes lock him up. They do play well against number one receivers often, but this year, not as much. So I'll give you a more definitive rank on Jakobi Meyers tomorrow when I look more in depth into this matchup against the Chiefs. But for now at 31, this is usually where I rank him, roughly a decent floor play for at least 8+ points. He could offer some high upside. He has played pretty well as of late. Next, I have Jayden Reed because Romeo Doubs is probably not going to play. Doubs has a concussion and they play on Thursday. So Jayden Reed going to be the safest target for Jordan Love. I do think Reed is a decent option, but you never feel safe with any Packers receiver. It could be Watson, it could be Dontavian Wicks, it could be Tucker Kraft, or just strictly Josh Jacobs in the snow. So he's my favorite. Jayden Reed, I think at 32 is a decent start, but a little tricky. I think Jordan Addison, equally as risky. All these J first names here. Jeudy, Meyers, Jayden Reed, and Addison all start with a J. That's kind of interesting. But back to the content. Jordan Addison, very high upside lately. Really interesting. It's kind of a gamble, though. I don't know if those deep shot touchdowns are going to hit all the time. At some point, they will pivot back in favor of Jefferson, and I worry about it. This week, I do have some concerns. The Cardinals are actually a bad matchup on paper, so I'm not quite ready to endorse him, but last week I was way too low on him. I had him almost like 18, almost 20 spots lower. He was barely a top 50 play for me last week. So Addison needs to move up the board, some high upside, now that Darnold is connecting with him down the field. But Keenan Allen, ODunze, highly targeted by Caleb Williams. Caleb looks good. Caleb threw for like 370 last week against Minnesota. So it could happen again. Detroit does give up a lot of yards, and I could see double-digit targets for both of them. That's what's happened the last 2 weeks with the new offensive coordinator. Caleb is chucking it a lot, and I really like Keenan and Rome. So last week, I did not endorse Keenan. He had an excellent game. I was wrong about Keenan, and I do think him and Rome are right there. I think it could pivot back to Rome right away. It's been 2 straight games where Rome has 10 targets, and Caleb wants to get him the ball. He almost had a touchdown. It did not hit last week. So Rome has high upside. It could not go back to Keenan this week. It could burn you with Keenan. So I think they're both in the same tier. I want to see it one more week before I elevate Keenan in a different tier than Rome. At the moment, I think I still trust DJ Moore the most, which is interesting because these other two have actually seen more targets the last 2 weeks in the new offense. But Keenan and Rome at 34, 35. Now we are hitting this group of like teammates where I rank back to back because I don't know for sure exactly what you're going to get. Who is the better player? They're kind of neck and neck. And that's why I have Tyreek Hill and Jalen Waddle back to back. Tyreek Hill questionable with a wrist injury, but not worried about it. I do think he'll play. I'm more worried about the snow and the randomness of this offense. Like, what is going on? Do they love Jonnu the most? I can't quite tell. Last week, Waddle was amazing, and he had the game I thought would go to Tyreek Hill. Tyreek Hill did not play that good against the Patriots at home, where he normally dominates. Waddle also plays well, but Waddle was fantastic. Waddle finally paid off. He'd been terrible for like 2 straight months. He was unplayable. So Waddle kind of comes out of nowhere here, and I kind of want to rank him above Tyreek Hill, but I don't know for sure. I kind of just want to bench both of them. If it's going to snow, I think it's a little too risky. I think Tua could struggle, and I don't feel that good. There's upside with both, but I think they're just flex plays. I don't really know exactly what will happen with Tyreek or Waddle. So at 36, 37, I think I'd rather just bench him. It's pretty tricky. They're in the same range as running backs like Najee Harris, Jalen Warren, and Travis Etienne. Like, you could totally get burned by these receivers, but there is still plenty of upside that could talk you into starting them. I think I'd rather avoid it. I want a bit more clarity from their situation with one more week of data from Tua. Let's move on, though, to Tyreek Hill and Davante Adams, who I kind of view in a very similar threshold. Tank Dell has not been the most reliable wide receiver 2. Neither has Davante Adams, but they both have really high upside. There's a chance that they could see like 12 targets randomly and could score like multiple touchdowns. I could envision a 150-yard game from either of them at any point, but it's not that safe of a bet. Similar to Waddle and Tyreek, like, you could totally get burned by either at any time. So at 38, 39, they're in the flex discussion, but I'd rather avoid it. With no teams on bye, I think they're a bit too unsafe to fully endorse. But the last player before I'm really trying to avoid the position, and now I think I'm just gambling, would be Xavier Worthy, who can always be better than DeAndre Hopkins. So I have him at the bottom of this tier, but DeAndre Hopkins is at the top of the tier. I think they're still in the same conversation. I have both teammates in the same realm. So Xavier Worthy, I get it if you think he's too unsafe, but you know his upside is fantastic. Worthy's still kind of interesting. I could see Mahomes really go off on Friday against the Raiders. He's been asking for a blowout, and if that happens, you would expect Worthy to be a big part of it down the field. So at number 40, I see some upside for him this week, but obviously it's a bit too risky to bet on all the time. Similar to Waddle, Tank Dell, Davante Adams, and Tyreek Hill, I would probably rather pass. After this point, though, if we're gambling and we're kind of desperate, why not swing for the fence? Nick Westbrook-Ikhine has so many touchdowns. The last 6 weeks, he has like 7 of them. I think, why not? At this point, if you're willing to go Xavier Worthy, why not go Westbrook-Ikhine off the wire? If he's still there, go for it. At this point, I have no problem doing that. I might be ranking him 20 spots too low, honestly. He could be top 20. Once again. But Cedric Tillman, dealing with a concussion, might not play, but I still think he's a lot better than Elijah Moore, and I don't think he's that much worse than Jerry Jeudy. So if I knew for sure he'd play, I'd actually bump him up maybe like 10 spots. I think Tillman's still very interesting, but given the concussion he suffered last Thursday, he plays on Monday. It might not be a factor. At the moment on Tuesday, I have no idea if he'll play. So at 42, Tillman is a bit more of a liability. At the moment, I would not be starting him compared to some other players I rank higher that are playing on Thursday or Friday. Like if you have Xavier Worthy and Cedric Tillman, right now I would be going Worthy for sure on Friday because I have no idea if Tillman will play on Monday. So that's the logic for the ranking there. With Keon Coleman, he didn't play before the bye. He might not play either, but he also has very high upside. I could see him being a very valuable piece this week against the Niners. Devon Valley has stepped up as the number 2 in Denver, so he's not that bad. Alec Pierce with no Josh Downs becomes way more interesting. We know he has elite upside, and so does Rashad Bateman. Against the Eagles, it's not a good matchup, but maybe down the field, Lamar does hit on a deep pass. MVS has been fantastic as the number 1 receiver for Derek Carr, and maybe a deep shot will hit as well, but you got to be pretty desperate. I think similar to Westbrook-Ikhine, like, yeah, you could get 20 points here, but really, are you going to start them? Probably not. Juwan Jennings and Deebo Samuel look unstartable with no Brock Purdy. I have no desire to do that. I don't think Purdy plays this week. So on Tuesday, I don't know if he plays. I'm not starting either of Jennings or Deebo. The only one I really trust is Kittle in San Francisco. And then at 50 and 51, I do think Christian Watson and Dontavian Wicks are also kind of interesting. Similar to the Niners receivers, you could have a fantastic game here from one of these players. You could also get burned for a bagel. I do not know where it will go. And with no Romeo Doubs, they're more compelling, but still too risky to trust. You're really playing with fire at this point. So I would bench him. And then after this point, I think you're really just playing with fire. There's a world where they really work out. I don't think I'd write them off. I think there are worth rostering. I think if they're on the waiver wire and you need depth, I would be picking up these players. But at this point, I don't think I'm starting them this week. I don't think Elijah Moore at Denver plays well. I think Jameis Winston has a very rough game against the Broncos. But Xavier Legette and Adam Thielen last week were involved, but not as much as Jalen Coker, who is questionable, might not play this week. I still have no idea what you're getting from the Carolina receivers. So I would pick them up if I need the depth, but I'm not ready to start them at all. I don't know what the role is for them, and they might be like neck and neck all season long. They kind of are going to be the same player for the most part. Last week, I believe the difference was 1 yard between the two. So no thanks with them. I won't start them at this point in time, but Cedric Wilson maybe could step up over MVS if healthy. Olave is not ready to come back, so he will be on the field a lot this week. But Amari Cooper hasn't really been established in this offense. This ranking, as I'm seeing it right now, kind of feels way too low. But similar to Tyler Lockett, I could see a 2-3 targets for him and 1 catch. I really don't know what I'm getting from Amari Cooper or Tyler Lockett for the most part. So these veterans are not the safest plays. I don't think they're top 50 plays. They have not been that established in their offenses the last few weeks. So kind of risky, maybe off the bye though. Cooper does get going. That is possible. He was dealing with a wrist injury though before the bye. He did play against the Chiefs, so he should be healthy. He should be fine. I don't trust him quite yet in this offense though. Demario Douglas, I think, would be the best Patriots receiver, but it's not saying much. I think him and Kendrick Bourne could pop off for double digits any given week, but it's hard to trust. Against the Colts, it's actually a decent matchup. It's not bad, but I don't think I trust Drake May to throw the ball to the receivers yet. He's mainly connecting with the tight end. So I'm going to pass on them. I'm also going to pass on Quentin Johnson, who dropped all 3 of his targets last week. He looked brutal, but in this offense, sometimes he does pop off for multiple touchdowns and 80 plus yards. He is interesting from a upside standpoint. Those are my wide receiver rankings for week 13. Here they are on the screen. And I do feel like the top 6 are difference makers, really elite upside from them. But the top 17, I think, are all players you're starting with a lot of confidence. They should go over 14 points. I think they're very safe plays. Definitely the players you should be starting in general. They've definitely gained your trust this season. But 18 through 28, I think, are very high-end flex plays, if not low-end wide receiver 2s. And I think for the most part, you still probably should expect 10-plus points from all of these guys. I think they're very good plays, and I think they would be excellent starts in your lineup this week. But then we hit the flex discussion where I think there's still decent starts, but kind of risky, kind of touchdown dependent. DeAndre Hopkins through Xavier Worthy, 29 through 40, I think are a little bit more nuanced in terms of who you're starting, who you're benching. It depends on your bench. They are the flex plays this week. But starting with Westbrook-Ikhine at 41, now you're just shooting for the fence and hoping for touchdown upside. It's not the worst bet with some of these players, but you know there's a lot of risk if it does not hit. So good luck at that point. Starting with Elijah Moore at 52, I do think I would be benching those players this week. And that's going to wrap up this video. Hit the like button, subscribe to the channel, and ring the notification bell so you get updated on all of my new content as soon as it's available. That's going to be it for me. I hope you enjoyed. My name's Adam Show. Thank you for watching. Nice and blunt.